Hey everybody, good morning. Welcome to the Morning Devo with Bo. It is January 12, 2022, and my voice is coming back. Hey, super stoked about that. And you could always catch these Devos here on Facebook, or you could go over to always my personal YouTube page at Bo Willette. And you can check them out there as well. They're on live too. So if you know any people that aren't so much into the Facebook platform, but maybe they might be into the YouTube platform, you could still send them over to a platform that they could use. So this week we are dedicating the entire week over, and it might even be the entire month, right? Over to our brother Jesus Urbina, who went to go be with the Lord recently, and our hearts definitely go out to his family, and everybody will be posted on when a memorial is happening for Jesus, so you don't have to worry about when that's going to happen. We'll let you know, and we will definitely broadcast that news. So I want to say good morning too to everybody that's in the house of Devo, some all the way from Nigeria, so welcome. And stoked you could be in here. My name's Bo Willette, originally from Southern California, lived in Maine too, Bethel, Maine, for a short stint. My parents are actually from the state of Maine. And then we went back to Southern California, lived there till I was in my early 20s, and then moved out here to the high desert. And been out in the wilderness ever since. But anyway, glad you could join us today. Genesis 47. Now I'm going to read this chapter, and I find this chapter super interesting. It's one of those little interesting subjects that people get into, and this one kind of touches on one of mine, and it's kind of economics. I know that sounds boring. How many of you guys took economics, in school? But there's a supply and demand issue going on in Egypt. And if you've taken a class like Economics 101, you learned about supply and demand. Well, there is not a lot of supply of food in the southern Middle East at this time, or northern of Africa. And here we have a demand, a huge population that is needing food. And so we're going to see how this plays out. So Joseph has his brothers prepped to go before the Pharaoh and say the right things in a sense, but, to be honest about what they do with sheep, and that's been their livelihood, and that's what they do. So Joseph went to see Pharaoh and told him, "My father and my brothers have arrived from the land of Canaan. They have come with all their flocks and herds and possessions, and now they are in the region of Goshen." So just as Pharaoh had asked Joseph to go and get his father and the rest of the father's family and bring them into the land of Goshen, which was not like a bad place to hang out in. It was really nice, not bad at all. I mean, it had water, access to water. It was definitely a place that their flocks were going to be taken care of. And I looked at the map, and it's not like they're too far from the beach, so they can do some surfing if they wanted to. Pretty cool, I must say. And so really not a bad spot, And so here the announcement is made to Pharaoh that, hey, that everybody's here. They've gotten here. And Joseph takes 5 of his brothers with him and presented them to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh asked his brothers, "What is your occupation?" And they replied, "We, your servants, are shepherds, just like our ancestors. We have come to live here in Egypt for a while, and there is no pasture for our flocks in Canaan." The famine is very severe there, so please, we request permission to live in the region of Goshen. So just as they were prepped, so they say. 5 brothers are elected to go before the Pharaoh. And here we go. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Now that your father and brothers have joined you here, choose any place in the entire land of Egypt for them to live, and give them the best land of Egypt, and let them live in the region of Goshen. And if any of them have special skills, put them in charge of my livestock too." What's kind of cool is you see, like, sometimes when you invest in something a lot, like these brothers invested in what? Animals a lot. There's a real, it's a real speciality, but it's something that's really needed. And so when times are hard, some of these amazing trades come to the light, come to the forefront as being really important in a society, because they're ones that really make for survival. Because animals need to be taken care of when they're, in a sense, domesticated and used for food and for the agricultural life of the society. And so you see that they have special skills that become, in a sense, really important to the Pharaoh, which is really cool. Even though the Pharaoh, it says, despised these shepherds. Why? Because they're around a lot of animals. And have you ever been in a barn? Yeah, it can be kind of stinky. And sometimes people that work and make a ton of money will look down on those that have jobs that are dirty. You know, they'll look at them and go, "Oh, that's just that kind of job," you know. And some people even grow to despise labor. And so some people work in a way where they don't have to use their hands per se. And so the society might value those jobs. And so they pay those workers incredible money for doing work that is basically sitting down. And it's not that it's not important at all, but it's just that they're not putting their hand in dirt. You know, but then there's other jobs where people are out in the fields and they're picking fruit. And sometimes the society will look at that and go, "Oh, you know, that shouldn't get paid what that other career did, because that other career, someone had to learn this skill, that skill, this skill, this skill, and all those skills, and they probably had to spend money in college or something to learn that information, and now they deserve a better pay." While there's people over there that really didn't have to learn any skill, they just learned how to put their hands in the ground. Well, and it's not so true, right? Every job has its skill, and Pharaoh sees that the shepherds had a skill that was pretty important. How important? He says, "Hey, take my livestock, and if they're good at what they do, man, put it into their hands." And you know, and so we always want to remember in our life that it doesn't matter where people work, or, what they do per se. Everybody has a skill set, and that's something to, I think, always learn to admire in people, and not disrespect in other people. Just because they did not go to a 4-year college, a 6-year college, an 8-year college life, doesn't mean that we disrespect someone's livelihood and what they do. And so it's interesting how different societies look at work differently, and what people do in a good light or in a not so good light. And I can't think of any society that doesn't have these kind of biases and prejudices, like job prejudices kind of within them. It seems like, I know when I was growing up, and you guys can remember this, like when you were growing up and someone said, oh, I'm going to work for McDonald's. People are like, oh, McDonald's, that's, and we would all make fun of it kind of thing, right? Even though we all knew we needed to get a job there because that's probably going to be the first place that hires us, as we're starting out in the workforce. But when you thought of the McDonald's job, you thought, oh, that was so, lowly. But is it? Is it really? You put me in on the line at McDonald's, and I'm probably not going to do that good. I'm probably going to need to learn some skills to be able to do it, and to be able to do it good, I'm going to have to really master those skills. And so, we got to be aware of some of our inner biases and some of our inner prejudices that go on within a society. And kind of acknowledge that before God too, and say, hey, God, help me, not to be one of these people that just look down on other people, or look up towards other people in an idolatrous way as well. Both avenues I don't want to go in. So Jacob, it says here, then Joseph brought in his father Jacob and presented him to Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. So, man, it's kind of a reunion, right? The old man is going to meet Pharaoh. How old are you? Pharaoh asked him. Jacob replied, I've traveled this earth for 130 years, but my life has been short compared to the lives of my ancestors. A nice, interesting line in the book, right? 130 years is a short life so far, Jacob says. But notice he says, my life has been short compared to my ancestors. And he talks about it as traveling the earth. And he says he's blessed Pharaoh again for before leaving his court. So Jacob blesses Pharaoh. Isn't that interesting? Jacob blessed Pharaoh. It's kind of, to me, that's interesting because who's the greater? Who's the greater? The one who gets blessed or the one who is giving the blessing? And it's, I find that interesting here in the narrative. Pharaoh must have saw Jacob as, man, pretty old cat, walking as a shepherd for this long, pretty amazing. And obviously this is the dad of Joseph, and Pharaoh loved Joseph. And so there seems to be a mutual blessing, a mutual love, here. And I love that. Pharaoh doesn't look at Jacob and just go, oh, Jacob, you've been shepherding forever, your whole life. You are just this little lowly person. You don't get that idea at all. So Joseph assigned the best land of Egypt, the region of Ramses, to his father and his brothers. Wow. And he settles them there just as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph provided food for his father and his brothers in amounts appropriate to the number of their dependents, including smallest children. So we really see the favor of Pharaoh in the life of Joseph and Jacob. And remember, Jacob is Israel. So Israel is coming under the hospice of the Pharaoh of Egypt at this time. Now, just remember, big picture Bible wise is that we're getting the narrative of how the people of Israel ended up in Egypt and why they ended up becoming slaves. So they obviously didn't start off that way, did they? No way. No way. And it says, meanwhile, the famine became so severe that all the food was used up. And many people were starving throughout the lands of Egypt and Canaan. By selling grain to the people, Joseph eventually collected all the money in Egypt and Canaan and put the money in Pharaoh's treasury. So, verse 14, by selling grain to the people, Joseph eventually collected all the money in the land. So he collects all the money all the grain, he sells out to the people, and they basically give him all the money. And so they don't have no more money. It says, when the people of Egypt and Canaan ran out of money, all the Egyptians came to Joseph. Our money is gone, they cried. Please give us food, or we will die before your very eyes. They don't have money anymore, so what are they going to do? What happens when you can't feed yourself anymore? What do you do? All the food, all the capital in the society is in the government's hand at this time. The government owns all the food that is available for anybody. And so when people are running out of capital, and they can't use it anymore as any value, or it's just all used up. Now what do they have left? And they don't have any means to provide. They don't have work. They can't, there's no purchase power at all. And it's so all the ducks, all the cards are with the government, if that makes sense to you guys at this stage. The people no longer have anything to work with at all. Their money is gone. They cried, "Please give us food or we will die." Joseph replied, "Since your money is gone, bring me your livestock." Well, now comes the capital, right? It was first just the money. Now comes the assets. Now the livestock, I will give you food in exchange for your livestock. So here you see them now bringing their Mercedes-Benz, their cars, their whatever they have, their livestock over to Joseph. Now, who's going to care for this livestock? Interesting, right? It's going to be Joseph's brothers. They are going to be kind of the masters of all this livestock that's going to be collected from the people of Egypt. So they brought their livestock to Joseph in exchange for food, in exchange for their horses, flocks of sheep, goats, herds of cattle, donkeys. Joseph provided them food for another year. So basically, people were unloading everything that they had, in their life. They looked at that car and said, well, we're going to have to sell the car. We'll sell it to the government, and the government will give us a check for some grain so that we can live. And that's what was happening. So the government was getting incredibly more, and the people in exchange were getting the opportunity to survive, to literally just survive. And so here we go. But that year ended, and the next year came and again and said, "We cannot hide the truth from you, my lord. Our money is gone, and all of our livestock and cattle are yours." So they have no more capital, right? No more on-hand cash, and it says, "We have nothing left to give." Now check this out, but our bodies and our land. Alls we have is for people to, give their land, to basically take what was been in their family forever and give that over, or to take their literal bodies and say, okay, now my being is yours. Giving the government your body, your whole being, and say, I am now in servitude of the government. So that's what they do. That's how desperate this situation is. But notice, the government just keeps getting bigger and more powerful, and the people in Egypt just get less and less powerful. They're put in a situation. There's a interesting special situation going on of a famine. Food is run, if not short, totally out. And they're in desperate times. And people, we will do desperate things in desperate times. And so here there is a selling of themselves. Why should we die before your very eyes? Buy us and our land in exchange for food. We offer our land and ourselves as slaves for Pharaoh. So this is Pharaoh's own citizens, people. Obviously not the aristocratic people, but this is the citizens, right? The working class, maybe, of Egypt, that now says, hey, we're going to have to just give you our land, like offer you our land. You can buy our land. The government owns all the property now. There is no individual property ownership anymore. And our bodies aren't even ours anymore. We're going to sell you us, and we will become slave to the government. And this is, I kind of go, wow, I know you guys must be going, whoa, Bo, this is a pretty economic kind of thing. But it's interesting that, when societies get desperate, it's interesting how the powerful always have the upper hand. They always have the deck. They always have all the money, all the property, all the capital. And when you have all the capital and all the property and all the everything, then you are the ones that can put people in a place of slavery. That's your ability. That's the power that you have, is you can make people slaves of the state. And so this happens not through, in a sense, a blatant coercion. The government's not, in a sense, saying, hey, we're going to force you not to have any food, but there's a famine in the land. There's a actual natural disaster that's taking place, a lack of food. Now, the way the power structure is set up, it's forcing those that do not have as much as those who do have into a place of literally giving up everything they've ever owned in their life. And it says, just give us some grain so we may live and not die, so the land does not become empty and desolate. So you're going to have a lot of dead people in Egypt if we don't get any food. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, all the Egyptians. I mean, Joseph, talk about a businessman. This guy was he's a capitalistic venturist, man. This guy was CEO of Pharaoh Incorporated. The land deals that were going at this time. And not only that, but he was head of the food administration. I mean, just the power that is in the hands of Joseph at this point is absolutely amazing, staggering to think about. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. All the Egyptians sold him their fields because the famine was so severe, and soon all the land belonged to Pharaoh. Now, is it good that one person own all this land, and that it all belongs to the Pharaoh? Something seems pretty wrong about that. But I gotta say that when I read a chapter like this, it makes me think of the corruption of human beings. That we, what we see here in this chapter is an incredible value being put on things monetarily. and a really warped a warped society where you have those that have everything and you have those that are losing everything. And that's how this world is. It's not, when you look at it in its yuck, it kind of can really be something that stirs your heart and moves your mind to be quite saddened by how this happens. And it happens today. It's happening. It happens all over the world all the time. You have the power structures that have, remember when you played Monopoly? Has anybody played Monopoly? Remember how do you win the game? You become the power structure, right? You own everything. You have all the capital. Everybody has to sell their things to you, right? And you become the greatest capitalist on the planet. And, I think when we read things like this, sometimes we forget words like mercy, compassion, love. And those seem to be so void in these economic sections, to me that's a bummer. So in verse 22 it says, the only land he did not buy was the land that belonged to the priest. They received the allotment of food directly from Pharaoh, so they didn't need to sell their land. And verse 21 said, for as the people, he made them all slaves from one end of Egypt to the other. Now check that out. Joseph made all of them slaves. Isn't that interesting? Joseph. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. All the Egyptians sold him their field because the famine was so severe. And soon all the land belonged to Pharaoh. So as for the people, he made them all slaves. Whoa. Isn't that interesting? Joseph. Joseph. I mean, this is Joseph. And we always have the great sermons on Joseph and Joseph this and Joseph that. But Joseph ain't Jesus. And we always have to remember that. There's a lot of types of Jesus in Joseph, And, but here all of them are made now slaves from one end of Egypt to the other. And, and in a sense, in the New Testament, the Bible speaks of us as being slaves of righteousness. In the book of Romans, chapter 7, you could read that term, slaves of righteousness, that we have all become, in a sense, a bondservant of Jesus. And a bondservant was a volitional slave, meaning one that put themselves underneath the master, not because they had to, not because they were forced, but because the master was so good that you never wanted to leave him. So you became a bondservant. And so the ancient people, when they fell into hardship and they became, in a sense, sold into a family as a servant, as a worker, you could literally live your whole life under that new master. If you like that master, you can become a bondservant. And the New Testament speaks of us in that way. Paul, a bondservant of Christ, a slave of Christ. Now Jesus' slavery, he says, man, my burden is easy, it's light, all that. And that's why coming to Jesus is the best thing you could ever do, because serving, the power structures, being a slave to the power structure of this world, that's going to be some hardship. There's going to be some hardship there. But serving the greatest king, the creator, being a slave to the creator, God is not only a righteous God, but he's a loving God, and he's a compassionate God, and he's a merciful God. So even though we come to him bankrupt, in total need of him, he says, yeah, you can be my slave, but I'm going to love on you. And that's the beautiful, beautiful, unique difference of the God of the Bible. That though we fall before the God of the Bible and can only offer our whole being to him, all of our possessions, everything we have over to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, Jesus, the Messiah, he opens up his arms and gives us promise upon promise of sharing in the inheritance that he has. And in similar ways, we see some of that here. That just as people bring themselves before Joseph and they become, in a sense, enslaved to the Pharaoh, they get to still live and partake of the wisdom of Joseph and all that. So, man, what an interesting chapter. And so we see a little more of the economics of this going forth, and you can read it on your own. And it's interesting. Jacob passes away at the end of this chapter, and we see that he settled in Egypt, in Goshen, for 17 years before he dies. Isn't that amazing? He lasted another 17 years in Egypt. Pretty radical. Hey, may God give us long, vigorous life. And may we, in a sense, bring all of our possessions, everything we own, even our own lives, to the great King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and just lay everything down at his feet, knowing that he is a God who is righteous, but he's also so loving, kind, and so filled with affection for you and for me. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So, hey, I wish the world was a different place, and the Lord promises us one day it will be. So we're definitely hoping that. You guys have a great day, okay? Take care. Bye-bye.